Alberto Alvarez goes into the house and eventually goes upstairs. He goes up these stairs shown in this picture, gets up to the landing, and proceeds into the bedroom, where he sees what appears to him to be Michael Jackson's lifeless body on the bed. Conrad Murray is giving CPR with one hand while Michael lay on the bed. Alberto Alvarez observes a condom catheter. He didn't know it was called a condom catheter, but he observes some device and tubing coming from the penis of Michael Jackson. What the medical experts will tell you is this is a device to collect urine when you're literally knocked unconscious for surgical procedures. This is what he sees on the body of Michael Jackson when he comes into the room and sees what he appears to be.
You're with The Hub. I'm Peter Dobby. This is live coverage of the opening statements from the defense and the prosecution in the trial of Michael Jackson's doctor, Dr. Conrad Murray. You're looking at David Walgren right now, the lead prosecutor. In the past 45 minutes or so, he's been taking us through Michael Jackson's use of prescription drugs as prescribed by his physician. He's taken us through how Michael Jackson's plans for a comeback tour grew and grew. He has made the point that Dr. Murray was not a specialist in anesthetics. He's also taken us through how potentially dangerous the key anesthetic is to the human body, this anesthetic that Dr. Murray was allegedly prescribing and administering to Michael Jackson. We've also had a little snippet from a voice recording recorded by the doctor on his iPhone of Michael Jackson when he was clearly very much under the influence of something. And he's also explained to us how the ordering process for the anesthetic was carried through. What we're looking at right now is the aftermath of the calls that went out from Dr. Murray to Michael Jackson's personal assistant, who then contacted the gentleman you're looking at top left on your screen now, Alberto Alvarez, who lived on site with Michael Jackson in a trailer to the left of the rented property that Mr. Jackson was sharing with his 3 children at the time of his death.
And what you'll learn is that 911 call was made at 12:20 p.m. What you'll also learn from the evidence is that phone call was not made at 11:56 or thereabouts when Sade Anding had heard the phone go dead and heard commotion in the background. That 911 call was not made at 12:12 p.m. when the defendant called Michael Amir Williams to say there had been a problem. That 911 call was not made at 12:15 when Michael Amir Williams returned the call and spoke to Conrad Murray, who only relayed to him that he needed to get there right away. The 911 call was instructed to be made by Conrad Murray at 12:20 p.m. Now, emergency response was on the scene immediately. However, it was altogether too late because Michael was already dead. But the paramedics did respond to the scene, and they took every effort they could to revive Mr. Jackson. You'll learn that they got on scene on top of the patient at 12:26 p.m. His pupils, Mr. Jackson's pupils, were fixed and dilated. There was no pulse noted by any of the paramedics on scene. Murray had indicated he felt that Jackson had been down only a minute. I was just talking to him. Although no one felt a pulse, Murray claimed he did. This was not felt by any of the emergency medical personnel on scene. And when specifically asked, what have you been giving him? What has he taken? The paramedics were told lorazepam. Specifically asked what had been administered. They were told lorazepam, and Conrad Murray never once mentioned the administration of propofol during his entire dealings with these emergency medical personnel. UCLA was on the phone with the paramedics, and they pronounced Michael dead. Conrad Murray indicated he wanted to take over responsibility and that he would accompany Mr. Jackson in the paramedics' rig. And that was agreed upon. So they transported Michael Jackson to UCLA. In this photo here is the paramedics' arrival to UCLA. This is actually Conrad Murray here in these loose pants and a white t-shirt. Nearby, I believe, is some of the security, Fahim Muhammad, Alberto Alvarez, Michael Amir Williams. And this is them entering UCLA, the emergency room area. When they enter into the emergency room area, obviously the emergency room doctors now want to know what transpired. So they inquire. Both Dr. Cooper and Dr. Wynn specifically ask Conrad Murray, what has he been taking? What have you given him? He indicates he had been taking Flomax and he'd had some Valium. The only agent he gave him was lorazepam. And never once mentions to these medical emergency room doctors that are trying valiantly to save Michael Jackson's life, never once mentions that he had administered any propofol whatsoever. Michael is eventually pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. on June 25, 2009. Following this, there's a search at the house at 100 North Carrollwood. Propofol bottle is found lying on the floor. Various prescription medicines are found on the nightstand, the majority of which are prescribed by Conrad Murray, although some are prescribed by other doctors. An ambu bag is found on the floor, which I'll talk about briefly in a moment. This syringe is found on the nightstand, and this syringe tests positive for both propofol and lidocaine. Also, this IV stand with a saline bag and a detached IV tubing and syringe was observed and collected on a subsequent day, but that syringe tested positive for propofol, lidocaine, and flumazenil. They observed on this table nearby where Conrad Murray would evidently sit a cardiology board review book, a book designed to help someone take and pass the cardiology board exam. They found a jug of urine seated on the chair, likely emptied into by use of the condom catheter that had been observed on Michael. And again, they saw the clothing, the jacket and the pants worn by Michael Jackson at his last performance on June 24, 2009. Now that's some of the evidence that was collected independent of Conrad Murray. The phone records depicting what he was doing, because you must recall there are only two people in this room, and Michael, being one of those two people, is dead. So the detectives did what they could to piece together the activities in that room through forensic, through phone records, to determine what were the actions of Conrad Murray while Michael lay there dying. But they did speak to Conrad Murray. Conrad Murray's attorneys, Mr. Pena, who's in court here today, and Mr. Chernoff, responded to phone calls of the detectives, and an agreement was reached where they would meet at the Ritz-Carlton on June 27, 2009 in Marina del Rey. And Mr. Pena and Mr. Chernoff showed up with their client, Conrad Murray. Detective Smith and Detective Martinez showed up. And the detectives were largely in the dark at this point as to what had caused the death. They did not have toxicology results. There was no obvious signs of trauma or anything indicating anything that they may be used to, such as gunshot wounds or strangulation or knifing. So this was an opportunity for Conrad Murray, in the presence of two of his attorneys, to tell them everything he knew about what transpired. And the detectives largely allowed him to do just that, to tell a narrative about what he knew about what had transpired during the night and day of June 25th, 2009. And what you'll learn, according to Conrad Murray, he was Michael's personal physician. He was going to accompany him on the tour. He'd been treating him for a little over 2 months before Jackson's death. He spent the night at Jackson's home at least 6 nights a week, and the purpose was to put Mr. Jackson to sleep with the general anesthetic propofol. For over 2 months, he was giving Jackson nightly doses of propofol. In this interview, 2 days after Michael's death, this is the first time Conrad Murray mentioned the administration of propofol. And what he says, in his own words,
more than 10 times, more than 20 times, 30 days a month, roughly, every day. So about
30 days a month, roughly, every day, for the over 2 months of his care that he was administering to Michael Jackson. Conrad Murray then proceeded to give a timeline of events of that night. And he states that he first put an IV in Michael Jackson's leg to hydrate him. That he started with Valium at 1:30 a.m. At 2 a.m. he switched to lorazepam, 2 milligrams. but Michael remained awake. This is all according to Conrad Murray. At 3 a.m., he switches to midazolam. Says he slept for about 12 minutes. At 3:20 a.m. until 4:30, Michael's still awake, according to Conrad Murray. At that point, again, according to Conrad Murray,
I was still awake. It was 4:30 in the morning, and he was wide awake. And then he complained. I got to sleep, Dr. Conrad. I have these rehearsals to perform. I must be ready for the show in England. And tomorrow I will have to cancel my performance. I have to cancel my trip because I cannot function if I don't get the sleep.
following that statement, according to Conrad Murray, at 5 a.m. he gave another round of lorazepam, followed by another round of midazolam. At 10 a.m., according to Conrad Murray, Mr. Jackson requested propofol.
I said, if you got propofol now, which of course you refer to as the milk, how much time, how much sleep you expect to have? You're going to be needing to be up no later than noon. And he said, just make me sleep, doesn't matter what time I get. I said, what would happen to your rehearsals and your schedule for the day? He said, I can't function if I don't sleep. They'll have to cancel it, and I don't want them to cancel it, but they will have to cancel it. So I agreed at that time that I would switch over to the propofol.
So the evidence will reveal, according to Conrad Murray's words, that once Michael Jackson indicated or he desired to cancel the rehearsal, Conrad Murray decided to give propofol. Once he knew that he did not need to get up at noon, Conrad Murray decided to give propofol. Now what Conrad Murray indicates is that he gave just 25 milligrams of propofol diluted with lidocaine. Whether or not this was followed up with a continuous drip will be for you to decide. But the amount he specifies is 25 milligrams of propofol. According to the experts, this would have put Michael to sleep for minutes, 5, 10 minutes, depending on the person. When you know from Conrad Murray's own words, Michael Jackson just said, cancel the rehearsal, I need to sleep. The evidence will reveal that much more than 25 milligrams of propofol was given in order to put Michael Jackson to sleep. According to Conrad Murray, it was slowly infused over 3 to 5 minutes, and he went to sleep. To give you an idea of what a minuscule amount of propofol we're talking about, 25 milligrams equals 2.5 cc's or 2.5 milliliters. In your standard 10 cc syringe, this is how much propofol Conrad Murray is admitting to giving on June 25th. But the evidence also shows, as I already discussed, that from the time of April 6, 2009 to Michael's death, over 155,000 milligrams of propofol had been shipped to Nicole Alvarez's apartment. But according to Conrad Murray, he gave just 25 milligrams that night. Following the administration of propofol, Conrad Murray indicates,
I wanted it. I've been watching for long enough period that I felt comfortable. But then I needed to go to the bathroom. So I got up, went to the bathroom to release myself of urine. I also considered getting rid of some of his urination that he had put in the jugs overnight. And then I came back to his bedside and I was stunned in the sense that he wasn't breathing.
the medical experts will tell you that is called abandonment. To take a patient with Valium, lorazepam, midazolam, and propofol, and to leave them unattended in that state is medical abandonment. But according to Conrad Murray, he was gone for but 2 minutes.
I was gone, I would say about 2 minutes.
The evidence, again, as I already indicated, shows phone records around this time reflecting approximately 45 minutes worth of phone calls, where for some reason around this time Conrad Murray decides to start making phone calls and conversing with other people. Right at the time when he indicates he had given the propofol at about 10:45 a.m. Back to the email at 11:17 a.m. It is at this time that Conrad Murray is responding to the insurance broker. While Michael lay in bed with all these drugs circulating through his body, Conrad Murray is literally emailing the insurance broker saying the reports about Michael's health are fallacious. Responding to the 911 call and the failure to call, you will hear from Conrad Murray himself that he does not call 911.
To speak to the 911 operator would be to neglect him.
So why didn't he have Michael Amir Williams call 911 when he called Michael Amir Williams at 12:12 p.m.?
I want him to, I couldn't ask him at that time to call 911 because he would want to know what it was about, and I have a patient that needs help, and I'm trying to assist, and I'm trying to do it the best I can and to try to get help.
In the same interview, Conrad Murray indicates the location of his medical bags. And you'll hear the interview. And you'll hear, the evidence will show that Conrad Murray sounds surprised that the medical bags were not already in the custody of LAPD. He makes a comment of, oh, you don't have them? He then tells them where the bags are, and they are recovered on June 29th, 2009. And where they are recovered, again, this is the bedroom where Michael died. This is the large closet, which is basically a room, and the arrow pointing to that closet there, and then the bathroom here. The items are actually recovered in this upper chamber of this closet, and there are 3 distinct bags. There's a blue Costco bag, there's what's been referred to as a baby essentials, appears to be some kind of diaper bag or something of that nature, blue and brown, and then there's this small black bag. But the items are recovered, and you'll hear all about the medical evidence that is recovered, the propofol bottles that are recovered. I'll talk a bit about this pulse oximeter that was recovered. Again, the saline bag with the bottle inside of it that Alberto Alvarez had mentioned was in fact recovered by coroner investigator Alyssa Fleek. Propofol bottles, lorazepam bottles, midazolam bottles, lidocaine bottles, all recovered at that location. Now, the standard of care, ladies and gentlemen, the standard of care in a medical case such as this hinges on a number of factors. And medical experts will testify to the standard of care and the gross lack of any standard of care exhibited by Conrad Murray. But they analyze the actions, the affirmative actions, they analyze the omissions by Conrad Murray. And they characterize it as minor deviation from care, a serious deviation from care, or an extreme, egregious deviation from care. Extreme deviation from care, meaning the doctor acted with gross negligence. Gross negligence, which is the element of involuntary manslaughter. Involuntary manslaughter is not an intentional homicide. It is a homicide as a result of one's gross negligence and essentially indifference. So I'm going to take you through some of the factors of analysis in the standard of care. You will suites, locations where they have advanced capabilities not only to treat the individual, but to revive the individual should things go bad. This type of setting is where propofol is utilized, not this type of setting. And you will hear from the medical experts with unanimity that the improper setting represents an extreme violation of the standard of care and amounts to gross negligence on the part of Conrad Murray. You will additionally hear that propofol is for the induction and maintenance of general anesthesia, for mechanically ventilated patients, and for procedural sedation. It is not indicated by any means for the treatment of insomnia. It is not an agent for the treatment of insomnia, and to use it to put someone to sleep in that manner is an extreme deviation from the standard of care and amounts to gross negligence. You also learn that propofol requires continuous medical monitoring. It requires an electrocardiogram, an ECG, so you monitor the heart. It requires automated blood pressure monitoring, pulse oximetry with an alarm, and capnography. Capnography measures the CO2 exhalations of your body. Blood pressure, the ECG measures the heart. So what did Conrad Murray have at scene? Well, as I indicated, there was the ambu bag found on the floor. But in Conrad Murray's own tape-recorded interview, he makes no mention of using the ambu bag. In fact, what you'll learn from the coroner's investigators is that when they recovered the oxygen tank near the bed and pulled it out of evidence after it had been booked into evidence, the oxygen tank was empty. So not only was the oxygen tank empty, but Conrad Murray himself makes no mention of using this ambu bag, which in theory would have been hooked up to that oxygen tank. There was no capnography monitoring equipment. There was no ECG. He did, in the house, a blood pressure cuff was recovered. The blood pressure cuff was recovered in the closet, inside of a zippered black bag, inside of this box, inside of this second black zippered bag, and by all appearances, and you will have this in evidence, appears to be pristine, if not unused. That is the blood pressure cuff that was found at the scene. How about pulse oximetry? Pulse oximetry measures the oxygen saturation in your blood, and it is absolutely a crucial component when administering agents such as this. However, as part of that absolute crucial component, it needs to have an audible alarm so that when things go bad, you know it. What Conrad Murray was using is this. It is the least expensive pulse oximeter probably on the market. It works just fine for particular needs, and that is, it's designed literally to be worn around a doctor's neck as they make the rounds at a hospital. They clip it onto a patient's finger, and they spot check. They literally, on site, look at the reading on the monitor to get a reading of the oxygen saturation levels. There is no audible alarm on this pulse oximeter. If you are not literally staring at this tiny screen, this is utterly useless. And for hundreds of dollars more, Conrad Murray could have had a real pulse oximeter with an alarm. It would not have justified him abandoning his patient, but at least there would have been the security of an alarm when oxygen saturation levels reach dangerous levels. This is what Conrad Murray characterized as the necessary safety measures. Propofol requires immediate access to all standard resuscitation equipment and drugs. This would include a crash cart, an automatic defibrillator, and emergency airway equipment, such as endotracheal tubes, things of that nature, so you can ventilate the patient, get air into their system, so you can bring them out of any dangerous situations. None of that was at the scene. None of that was recovered at the scene, nor does Conrad Murray make any mention of having any of that at the scene. This was another extreme deviation from the standard of care and amounts to a serious neglect and gross negligence. Propofol requires continuous presence, visual monitoring, and vigilance. And if you are the type that is willing to abandon your patient, then you need to make sure there's another individual who's skilled in the area of resuscitation and medical care to monitor that patient with two eyes on the patient. is absolutely critical when you're dealing with an agent such as propofol. But we know from Murray's own words that he abandoned Michael Jackson. This, including the abandonment, including the preoccupation with the email and the phone calls, amounts to another extreme deviation, gross negligence, gross medical care. The benzodiazepines, when combined with the propofol in this type of setting, they contribute to the respiratory problems, the cardiovascular problems. They heighten and exacerbate the dangers that already exist individually in each agent alone. So in this setting, without the necessary equipment, without the necessary resuscitative equipment, this, again, is yet another extreme deviation and amounts to gross negligence. Written informed consent. This is a process by which doctors discuss the procedure, a serious procedure such as this, with their patient. They discuss the dangers, the alternatives, the complications, the risks, the benefits. It is crucial that a patient go in informed right that time, before the procedure, before the sedation, before the anesthetic agent is used, and with written informed consent, sign that they willingly acknowledge the dangers. And no such document was found or created. This is an extreme violation of the standard of care. This alone amounts to gross negligence. Requires charting and documenting all vital signs, dosages, at least every 5 minutes. This is not only for the benefit of the doctor at scene so they can go back to their chart and realize what they gave at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, so they don't have to guess. It is also absolutely crucial in a setting such as this when emergency personnel are responding and seeking out the truth and they cannot find the truth. No medical documents were recovered, and when they were subpoenaed and requested, the only documents provided related to care months, if not years before. No medical records documented any of this care at 100 North Carrollwood. This is an extreme, egregious violation and represents gross negligence standing alone. Basic common sense requires that 911 be called immediately. Basic common sense. And we know that was not done. This is another extreme deviation from the standard of care and amounts to gross negligence. Also, note the relationship between the doctor and the patient. There was no doctor-patient relationship. There was no relationship in which the doctor uses his medical judgment, his medical knowledge to advise the patient, to refuse inappropriate care, to walk away if that is the only option, but to have a doctor-patient relationship where the doctor is in charge of the care to be administered. And if it is not appropriate care, then the doctor does not provide it. No, what the evidence shows existed here was an employer-employee relationship, where Conrad Murray was working not for the best interest of Michael Jackson, not for the health of Michael Jackson. Dr. Murray was working for $150,000 a month. He was an employee. He acted as an employee. He did not act as a medical professional using sound medical judgment. In an egregious and unethical violation of the standard of care, the evidence shows Conrad Murray deceived the paramedics. When specifically asked what agents had been given, he never once mentioned propofol. As a team of paramedics worked to bring Michael back to life, Conrad Murray remained silent as to the propofol he had administered. This is an extreme, unethical, and unconscionable violation of the standard of care and is by itself gross negligence. But this was repeated once again upon his arrival to UCLA, where he deceived the emergency room doctors. When specifically asked by Dr. Wynn, when specifically asked by Dr. Cooper what had been administered, Conrad Murray mentioned lorazepam. He made no mention of propofol to these doctors trying to save Michael's life. You will hear from the doctors about these levels of gross negligence, and you will hear their opinions in which they state that almost nothing the defendant did reflects the actions of a trained physician. It instead represents the actions of an unskilled, non-medically trained individual. You will hear from an expert who will tell you that the multiple breaches of the standard of care directly contributed to Michael Jackson's untimely death. You will hear from the experts that the defendant acted with gross negligence, indicating a far greater concern for himself than his patient. And you will hear that Murray's primary use of his medical training and licensure was to give Jackson access to unlimited supplies of propofol that he administered with complete disregard for Michael Jackson's safety and for Michael Jackson's life. And put most simply, you will hear that Conrad Murray acted with gross negligence and an extreme departure from the standard of care and was a cause of Michael Jackson's death. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a summary of the evidence you will hear in this case. The defense will obviously have an opportunity to present evidence. They will have an opportunity to present an opening statement if they so desire. Regardless of what is presented by the defense in this case, there are certain facts that will be beyond dispute. There will be certain facts that will remain unchanged and unchallenged. Conrad Murray, as the doctor on scene, had a legal duty of care to use his best medical judgment to do no harm to Michael Jackson. Conrad Murray, with his eyes on the anticipated $150,000 lucrative contract, instead agreed to provide Michael massive amounts of propofol on a regular basis in complete disregard of all acceptable standards of medical care. The evidence will also remain unchanged that Conrad Murray figuratively and literally abandoned Michael Jackson on June 25th, 2009. He left this vulnerable man filled with Valium and midazolam and lorazepam and propofol with no medical monitoring equipment, no necessary resuscitative equipment. He left him there, abandoned him to fend for himself. It violates not only every standard of care, but decency from one human being to another. Michael was in that state, in that bed, because of the drugs administered by Conrad Murray. That is why he was in that state, in that bed, when Conrad Murray walked out of the room to make phone calls, to go to the restroom, or whatever he may have done. Whatever theory the defense puts forward, whatever evidence the defense puts forward, it will be clear that Conrad Murray abandoned Michael when he needed help. It was Conrad Murray's gross negligence. It was Conrad Murray's unskilled hands and his desire to obtain this lucrative contract of $150,000 a month that led Dr. Murray not only to abandon his patient, but to abandon all principles of medical care. Conrad Murray's actions, Conrad Murray's omissions to act, directly caused the death of Michael Jackson. And at the close of all the evidence in this case, after you've absorbed all the facts in this case and have absorbed the law in this case, the people will ask you in no uncertain terms to return with a verdict of guilty for the solitary crime charged, involuntary manslaughter.